Moving on, we continue our conversation on the Iran war. Joining me is Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat. Ambassador Kumar, good evening and welcome to DD India. Now, what do you make of Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, from his first statement? I mean, he addresses the Iranians, Gulf neighbors and the adversaries, US and Israel. Do you see change or continuity vis-a-vis the manner in which the clerical regime had spoken in the past?
Thank you very much for having me. No, I see a stubborn defiance, if you like. I think the tone is one of defiance. He's essentially sent three important messages to the wider international community and the United States. The first one, he says, is that if we have to block and continue blocking the Strait of Hormuz, we will do it. That has implications for the movement of oil, as you know, and the prices of oil. Second, he says Iran has to avenge the death of the martyrs, in particular the girls' school, where a number of girls allegedly have been killed. And the third message is perhaps the most important. He says that it's perfectly all right for Iran to strike the American bases in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. And as you know, there are as many as 30 bases of the United States in that region. And the Iranian leader is making it abundantly clear that it's okay from Iran's point of view to strike the bases. So that is where we are. I do not see any olive branch being extended by the new leader. If anything, the new leader, as you rightly hinted in your opening remarks, is showing some continuity with the tough position taken by his father. And I think, frankly, at this point, I do not see any scope for a diplomatic negotiation. In terms of the first statement made by the leader, what diplomats were looking for is some kind of opening, and whether US and Iran, maybe through an intermediary, can negotiate, but I don't think we are there yet.
Okay, Ambassador, let's talk about the leader from the other side, Donald Trump. If I were to quote him, he says, "We won, but don't want to leave early," unquote. What is your sense of what America has won so far? The regime change that was talked about in the beginning has not happened. Khamenei has been replaced by a Khamenei. There's no update on Iran's nuclear enriched material either. What is your sense of how Donald Trump is looking at this conflict?
So I think the United States under President Trump, especially in this conflict, has sent out mixed messaging. Even with regard to the duration of the war, I think at various times the leaders, including President Trump, have said that the war will be over quickly. At other times, they have said it could last a month or two. So there is mixed messaging. But having said that, as you rightly say, there has been no regime change. But you could say there has been regime alteration. If you remember the Venezuela's example, where I think the leader Maduro was captured and taken away, but Maduro's vice president now runs the country. Right. And she apparently seems to be listening to the US, and perhaps the US was trying for some such thing in Iran, but that has not happened. Obviously, the Khamenei's son, who's now the supreme leader, we have just explored that he sounded very, very defiant. So that has not happened. I think what has happened is the destruction of Israel's ballistic missile capability. To what extent, I don't know, but military analysts say that there have been a reduction of missiles and projectiles and drones coming from Iran from the beginning of the war. That is one thing which has happened for sure. The second thing, I think, where President Trump could claim victory is whether Iran's ability and capacity to support its proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, has that been degraded? Because that is the only concrete thing that I see, frankly, from this military action. Because Iran used to carry out extraterritorial crimes or incidents through the proxies, has that been degraded? We will have to wait and see. But I suspect if President Trump wants to declare victory, and put an end to the war, he will claim that that Iran's ability to produce missiles has been substantially degraded, and Iran's ability to use proxies to carry out, incidents and so on outside of Iran has also been affected. But those are the only two things you can legitimately claim. On all other issues, frankly, Iran is exactly the same as before. The people of Iran have not taken to the streets because they are worried about their own safety with bombs falling all around. So there has been no question of protests and Iranians taking over the government, is what President Trump at one point said, why don't you take over the government? That has not happened. And as you rightly say, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, they are the backbone of the previous regime. They continue to be the backbone of the present regime.
And there's a greater focus lately on the Strait of Hormuz, the disruptions that are being caused, the potentially global energy crisis that the world may be looking at. How effective is Iran's strategy of sort of causing global economic pain and energy crisis as a strategy? I mean, do you see this sustainable for the country?
Well, so far, I have to say that strategic reserves of various countries, releasing of reserves by the International Energy Agency and by the United States itself. So far, that seems to be cushioning the impact of oil prices, and therefore, we are not seeing oil prices much above 100. So we are looking at 95, 96, it went down to 90 and again has risen today. But I would say safely that I don't think we are looking at a stage where oil will rise to 140 or 150 or 200. That doesn't seem to be the case. But I have to say, in the medium to long term, it also depends on Israel's resilience and Israel's insistence on blocking the Strait of Hormuz, because Hormuz can affect at least 30% of oil production in the world. It can prevent the movement of oil, and that can lead to an increase in prices. So I would say, in answer to your question, that we haven't seen the full effect of Iranian actions yet.
Right. If we talk about another player in this conflict, Israel, would you agree that one is hearing less from the Israeli leadership as compared to the US leadership, for instance, the past few days? And how do you see their role and objective in the conflict? Would you say their sort of objectives converge with the Americans?
Oh, no question about it. Some would go as far as to say, I don't know if it is correct or not, but it is arguable that actually the US is fighting Israel's war. And that's why the US has been at pains to point out that, no, we are not following Israel. We are doing our own thing. Now, it is another matter that down the road, the goals of United States and Israel may diverge. For the time being, I would say their objective is the same, which is to defang and defenestrate Iran. That is what both countries want. They want a situation where Iran is so weakened that it will not be able to support proxies, or it will not be able to throw or rain ballistic missiles on its neighbors and so on. But in the medium to long term, there will be a divergence of goals between Israel and the United States. And that is because the United States has midterm elections coming. If petrol prices and crude prices, oil prices remain high, that will affect inflation. The MAGA community, which is President Trump's base, is divided. Some of them are saying, why are we fighting this war? There is nothing in it for us. And others, of course, are supporting President Trump. Can that divergence become serious as we go towards midterm polls? So there is a prospect of Israel and United States diverging in terms of its objectives. But for now, they are in it together, and their common objective seems to be to weaken Iran substantially.
Right. I mentioned Israel also to bring in what is going on in Lebanon, almost a parallel conflict. Some 700,000 people have been displaced in this conflict. How do you see that also as a very, very important point of friction that is expanding in the region?
It's always been Israel's strategic objective, to the best of my understanding, that Hamas and Hezbollah constitute a threat, an existential threat for Israel. Now, through the actions carried out in Gaza last year and before, Hamas has pretty much been weakened. And now Israel appears to be turning its attention to Hezbollah. And without the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people's support, Hezbollah has nowhere to hide. So, what Israel seems to be doing is to do carpet bombing, not literally but figuratively, of Lebanon, so that the Lebanese government, I read somewhere, has also made it clear that Hezbollah has no place in Lebanon. That is what Israel wants. They want Hezbollah with no place to hide. So that seems to be the objective vis-a-vis their actions in Lebanon.
Right. Ambassador, if we talk about India's concerns and priorities vis-a-vis this conflict, one would be the safety of the Indian nationals in West Asia. Second, of course, concerns around energy supply. Talking about the first one, how do you evaluate the kind of risk such a conflict poses to such a huge and diverse diaspora all over West Asia, and the efforts that we see are being made by the embassies, by the carriers to ensure the safety of Indians?
Well, I was ambassador in Bahrain for 4.5 years, so I have a fairly good idea about the Indian community and what the embassies can do. What I want to say clearly is that evacuation or wholesale evacuation of 9 to 10 million people from the 6 Gulf countries is not a feasible proposition in the medium to long term for 2 reasons. One, the sheer numbers, and secondly, they themselves may not want to leave. As long as Iran is targeting these strikes, and they are saying they're only going to target the American bases and infrastructure, I think at least we can be safe in the hope that Indians will be safe. We have left it largely to the governments concerned in these countries to keep our nationals safe. There are no civilian casualties, so that's fine. The greater danger that I see is that economic activity in these countries will suffer. And if that suffers, then the employment prospects of Indians and their own economic future takes a hit. That I'm unable to predict. I'm hoping that the war will be short-lived, that the economic disruption will be short-lived, and that Indians can quickly get back to status quo ante. But that is something we will have to wait and see. The physical life and their own safety, I would not think it's such a big issue at this stage. They have, I think, been told that, listen, use shelters, work from home, etc. So that will be fine. But I think going forward, you will have to see the trajectory this war takes. The last point is on energy. I'm somewhat assured by the statement of the Minister of Petroleum in the Parliament that we are well stocked. Whichever way you look at it, frankly, we have to pray and hope that the war comes to a quick end.
Right. And the Prime Minister also just a short while ago in a program, he spoke about how India has diversified its sort of energy sources, including renewable. Ambassador, finally, we've seen India practicing a policy of what we call strategic autonomy in engaging with West Asia in the past, different contexts and situations. How do you see the evolution of that policy? I mean, I speak in the context of India co-sponsoring the UNSC resolution condemning Iran's attack on the Gulf countries. Of course, the immediate priority is the safety of the Indian nationals, and perhaps India speaks from that context. But do you see that policy of strategic autonomy also evolving vis-a-vis this conflict?
I see a combination of a strategic autonomy and sheer pragmatism, if you ask me. You know, with about 9 million people who live there, we can't afford to adopt a high horse and say that, listen, we are going to take positions on the basis of this or that. Frankly, we have to be concerned about their lives. We have to be concerned about their future. We have to be concerned about our energy security. If that demands that we buy oil from as many sources as possible, access energy from as many countries as possible, I consider that part of strategic autonomy as well. And it's, as I said, it's a combination of strategic autonomy and pragmatism. And I'm assured that the United States has said you can buy Russian oil for now, but frankly, there is no choice, because if Strait of Hormuz comes under pressure, Europe and others will be lining up to buy oil. I think we need oil in order for the Indian economy to keep going. And therefore, I think it's a combination of strategic autonomy and sheer pragmatism.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar, thank you for joining us on DD India News Hour.